Hey everyone, this is Tony Gentilcore coming to you from Boston, and I want to congratulate you on having impeccable taste in footwear with your pedestal footwear. And I want to talk a little bit today about the advantages of barefoot training or minimalist training, especially with regards to the deadlift. The real advantage to barefoot training or not wearing shoes when you deadlift is, think about the cement blocks that most people wear for shoes have this massive heel lift of like an inch and a half, sometimes 2 inches. And if you're wearing shoes, that's basically another inch or inch and a half or 2 inches that the bar has to travel. So you're further away from the bar, from the ground, when you're wearing shoes like that. So not wearing shoes and wearing your pedestals are going to be a good way to get yourself closer to the barbell, so it's less work that you have to do. Number two, when it comes to those heel lift, it's kind of pushing your weight forward and more anteriorly, and what we want to do is get our weight back a little bit so we can better engage our posterior chain, more of our hamstrings, more of our glutes, which is going to help us deadlift more weight. So those would be the two big advantages with not wearing shoes when we deadlift. The reason why I like wearing the pedestals is because the bottom of the feet really has good traction with the floor. So if you are working out in a gym that has a slippery floor or doesn't have any black matting or anything like that you kind of grab onto, the pedestals are a great way of getting tension in your feet and allowing you to have what I like to call an active foot, where we're spreading the floor with our feet, we're getting tension in our hips and providing more stability to the spine, and that's going to again allow us to deadlift a lot more weight. Not to mention too, when we don't wear shoes and we do more barefoot training, it allows us to learn to engage and use those small intrinsic muscles at the bottom of our feet. So that can be a big advantage because it's going to help with our ankle mobility. It's going to get us to learn to feel the floor a little bit more. And again, just gets us out of those shoes, and which kind of generates into bad habits. So hopefully that makes sense and it gives you a better idea of why it's advantageous to not only deadlift without shoes on, but wear the pedestal footwear to better engage our tension, to get us closer to the floor, and to really get that stability that we're looking for to help us improve our deadlift performance. So I'm Tony Gentilcore, Boston, Massachusetts, and I'll talk to you soon. Today I want to talk about what a deadlift actually is. I think a lot of people have the notion that a deadlift automatically equates to a heavy bar on the ground where we're pulling it off, which is cool, and it's kind of what we're kind of gravitating towards, but the deadlift is a hip hinge. So you can think about it, it is not a squat, it's a hip hinge. So to break the two around, we can say a squat is maximal hip bend with maximal knee bend, and a hip hinge is going to be minimal knee bend with maximal hip bend. Okay, so the way we can kind of groove that, there's several drills I like to use to kind of get people to appreciate and to kind of groove a hip hinge. One is what I do, the wall sit. So all I can do, everyone has a wall, so we can just walk over to a wall, and we're gonna start with our foot against the wall, and we're gonna take 1 foot length away and another foot length away. So we're about 2 feet away from the wall. And what I like about this is the goal here is to use the wall as a target to kind of push our butt towards. But the thing is we don't want to squat it, and we don't just want to bend over. So if someone squats down, they're not going to hit the wall. Okay, that's not a hip hinge. Also, if someone just kind of bends over and they don't have a posterior hip shift or weight shift, they're also not hip hinging. So again, the objective here is to kind of brace our abs, spread the floor with our feet, and think about chopping our hips in half, and we're pushing our butt back till it taps the wall. Boom. Push back until it taps the wall. Finish with a somewhat slight glute squeeze. Hinge back, touch the wall. And that's just an excellent way to get people to learn a proper hip hinge pattern. Some other drills I like to use is one I stole from strength coach Dan John, and it's called a belly go hip swing. So what I can do is take a standard kettlebell. I'm going to kind of put it in my palms, and I'm going to point the bottom of the kettlebell and put it right into my sternum. And what I'm going to do is pretend like I'm pressing it through my sternum, and I'm going to hip hinge back here. So the weight in the front is going to kind of get us to engage our anterior core, and we're going to push our hip back. Again, focusing on that posterior weight shift or posterior hip hinge. Again, another excellent, easy drill to use to groove the hip hinge. Number two is we can kneel down and we can put this kettlebell behind us, okay? Hold it like so, and again, use the weight to kind of sit back into it and kind of appreciate that hip hinge pattern. So again, if people are still having issues standing up, we can take some joints out of the equation, take the ankles out, take the knees out, and just really focus on that hip hinge pattern, just like so, okay? And another thing we can do is just take a standard PVC stick or even a broomstick and get people to learn that with that hip hinge, everything's got to be in line and move at the same time. So think about our forehead, our shoulders, our hip. They're all moving at the same time. They're staying in line as we do that hip hinge. So what we can do is use this stick and get 3 points of contact behind our head, in between our shoulder blades, and then our sacrum, and keep points of contact the whole time and learn to hip hinge back. If I do it incorrectly and round my back or squat down or anything like that, we lose points of contact, and it's just giving you some feedback to keep a proper spine position while we're doing that hip hinge. What's great about the deadlift is that it's one of those movements and exercises that can be catered to the individual needs of a person as well as their abilities. So, as opposed to the counterpoint to that. So, what I mean by that is it's a great novice exercise, and it can be progressed accordingly into more advanced stages. So, what I want to discuss today is the difference in why we would do a trap bar or a hex bar deadlift compared to a sumo deadlift compared to a conventional deadlift. What I have behind me is a trap bar deadlift, and it has elevated handles. So what's great about this is that this is great. This is a great introductory way or more user-friendly way of introducing the deadlift to people because their center of mass is right in between the bar. So people with limited ankle mobility, hip mobility, or even upper back mobility, this is going to be a much easier way for them to get in a conducive position to make sure that we're keeping an anatomically neutral spine while we're doing the deadlift. And they're going to be less likely to hurt themselves. Not to mention with the trap bar, I can flip this over and make it even lower to the ground. So this can be elevated to fit someone's mobility issues, and it can be elevated even more. I could put plates underneath these plates to elevate even more if needed. But anyway, this is the variation I like to use with a lot of people when I'm starting them out with the deadlift. And what really, a couple key points I want to make with this is foot position. If you're too wide in the trap bar, you're going to have nowhere to go but in with the knees. We want to try to avoid that. So what I like to tell people is their foot position should be as such with their power position. So if I were to test your vertical jump, are you going to jump from this position, or are you going to bring your feet in a little bit and jump from here? So it's probably going to be the latter, and that's the power position. So I want feet a little bit a little narrower than shoulder width apart. I like to have people maintain, like I like to pretend that there's whatever insignia is here, whether it's New Balance, Nike, Reebok, whatever, this should face forward the whole time. It should never really face the floor. So they're going to keep their chest up, they're going to grab the handles, and what I like to tell people is pretend like they're trying to squeeze oranges in their armpit, and that's going to get the lats to fire and provide a lot more upper back stability. They're going to push their hips back, so you want to chop your hips in half, and use the handles to kind of pull your chest up. So I'm going to use the weight as a counterbalance to get my weight back and get my chest tall, and now I'm ready to rock and roll. And you can tell from this position that I'm in a nice anatomically neutral position. My shoulders are above my hips are above my knees. And that's generally a good starting point for most people. So let's move over to the straight bar. So I'll get this out of the way. So we'll go straight bar. So next up will be a sumo deadlift. So a sumo deadlift is going to be a little bit of a much wider stance. You got a traditional sumo stance, which is going to be super wide, and you have what we call like a narrow or modified stance. I tend to like the modified stance because a lot of people don't have the adductor mobility to get that far out. And what I like about this variation is, again, it takes into consideration one's mobility issues, any limitations they have their ankles and their upper back and hips. So we're decreasing the range of motion a little bit, and again, we're able to keep a better upright torso. So what we're going to do is start up right up against the bar, protect those oranges, or protect those armpits, squeeze the oranges, work our way down so our hands are inside the handles, and make sure we push our knees out a little bit. So again, we don't want them in. We want to make sure we push those knees out. Feet are externally rotated a little bit. I'm going to grab the handles. A nice cue I like to use is tell people to make sure the bar clicks. They'll hear a little click, and that's going to get tension out of the bar. And then we're going to get our weight back. Chin is tucked, and we're ready to go. So I'm using that bar, the weight of the bar, as a counterbalance to pull my chest up, and then I'm going to pull from this position. And then from there we can transition to what I would deem the most advanced variation of a deadlift, and that's a conventional deadlift. So that's going to be, feet are going to be a little bit closer together, or a lot closer together, and are, again, similar to the trap bar, but now the bar's in front of us. So the line of pull is a little bit different, so our center of mass is a little bit different. And this is technically the more advanced, or the most advanced variation of a deadlift, but ironically it's also the one most people gravitate towards and they're not ready for. So again, this is highly individualistic. None are better than the other. It's really what's going to set someone up for the most success. So same things, squeeze the oranges, going to push my hips back, chest tall, use the weight as a counterbalance to pull my chest tall, pull the bar into me, and then I got all my tension in my lats, all my tension in my hamstrings, and I'm going to force into the ground, and I'm going to pull off the floor. So those would be the rationale of why, or the progression of least advanced to most advanced for the deadlifts. Trap bar and sumo lend themselves to people who have a little bit more mobility restrictions or have a limited range of ROM and are a little bit more user-friendly, and the conventional deadlift is going to be your most advanced variation. So hopefully that was helpful. It gave you some easy tips to go by, and next week we're going to go through some troubleshooting and some other coaching cues with the deadlift. So until then, we'll see you soon. Lastly, what I want to talk about really quickly is the two biggest mistakes I see a lot of people make. It's just basic lack of tension with setting up the deadlift. So anytime I see somebody set up for a deadlift and I see either their upper back round or maybe their hips come up too fast, that just tells me that they're not getting any tension in their lats, and they're focusing more on pulling the weight off the floor rather than pushing force into the ground. So the biggest cue I like to use with people is telling them to protect their armpits, or pretend like they're squeezing oranges in their armpits, and that's going to get the lats to fire, and that's going to give them a lot more upper back stability and stiffness, so they're less likely to round their back. So as they work their way down to the bar, I'm going to pull tension out of the bar, pull tension out of the bar, protect my armpits, squeeze the oranges, and then from here, my objective is to put force into the ground and then to lift the bar up, and make sure on the way down that we're still squeezing those oranges on the way down, because what I don't want to happen is the shoulders to round forward. So I'm going to show you a really quick drill how to activate the lats in a second, but remember, with the deadlift, we want to keep the upper back stiffness, get the lats firing, and put force into the ground. So another cue I like to use is that it's just try to leave a heel print into the ground. So you don't want it to be into your toes, like really drive your heels to the ground, put force in the ground to lift up. So really quick drill I like to use just to get people to learn what it feels like to actually turn on their lats is I'll just take two bands like so. I'll have them assume their regular deadlift stance, and I'll pull the bands towards them. So right now my lats are firing like crazy, and I'll just do a normal hip hinge and lock out the top, all the while maintaining that tension in the lats right here. So this helps build context, so they know what it feels like that when their lats are firing. And I'll have them do a few reps of this, boom, boom. And that just allows them to build context, like, oh, that's what it feels like. So I can take that drill and apply it to the barbell.